This is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is February 20th, 2014, and I'm interviewing Michael Elizondo Jr. for the Oklahoma Native Artist Project, sponsored by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at OSU. We're at Michael's studio in Oklahoma City. Michael, you're Cheyenne, Chumash, and Kaw, is that correct?
Yes.
You got your MFA from the University of Oklahoma in 2011. And you've already distinguished yourself with some important group and solo shows in Minneapolis and Washington, D.C., among other places. You've won several grants and awards, including Judge's Choice at the 2012 Cherokee National Holiday Show. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Yep.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I grew up in Tahlequah, Oklahoma.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I have one younger brother and an older brother and an older sister. There's 4 of us.
What did your folks do for a living?
My dad, he's a retired art teacher, and he taught around Muskogee, Hilldale, and all around Tahlequah. And my mom, she's a security guard with the Hertz.
How about your grandparents? Did you have a relationship with them?
Yes, primarily my grandmothers. My grandpa on my mom's side, he passed away when I was 10, and my dad's dad, he passed away before I was born. But so I've been pretty close with my grandmas. They're both still here, and my grandma on my dad's side lives in Tulsa, and my grandma on my mom's side lives here in Oklahoma City.
Your grandma on your Cheyenne side is a well-known bead worker. What other kinds of Cheyenne influences emerge in your art?
Yes, my grandma, I'm very close with her. She's the one who's been taking me to our ceremonial grounds when I was younger, and she gave me a lot of influence with the Native American Church and our Cheyenne Sundance. And whenever I was younger, she always explained to me the purpose of some of her designs that she made in her beadwork through cradle boards, vests, moccasins. And whenever I was younger, I really didn't do that same influence directly as far as beadworking. My way of expressing what she taught me was through painting, drawing, and in time it's pulled me in the direction that I do beadwork too. So this is kind of how it works together.
Yeah, I've seen some really beautiful examples at your place. What's your first memory of seeing Native art? Whenever
my dad was attending Northeastern State University in Tahlequah, I was in 2nd grade, and I remember going to some of the art shows that he'll be invited to around the area of Tahlequah and Muskogee, and I believe Merv Jacobs and Bill Rabbit, they're amongst some of the artists around the area. So as far as the subject matter of Native American artists, those were some of the first examples. What is your first memory of making art? I don't have one. For as long as I remember, I've always had the urge to make things. Whenever I got older, it just stuck with me, and it's just been growing ever since. How much encouragement from your family did you have to develop your artistic skills? I had a lot of encouragement from all of my family, primarily my dad and my grandma. My dad, as he was an art student, whenever I was younger, he would always encourage me and my brothers to tag along with him. And my brothers always seen it as a drag, but I was always pretty excited to
the art classes you're saying?
To some of the events that the school would have, and so he would, whenever he would be working in, take example, the pottery studio, I would run off in the corner and play with the spare clay they had in the building, and then as well as my grandma, she always took the time to not only remember some of the oral histories that we have with our people, but to interpret it in some kind of way through the arts.
Did you have any other relatives on either side of the family who were artistic?
Yes, not as much on my dad's side. His father, his stepdad, he was a painter. I took a lot of influence from him as well. But on my grandmother's side, she's the oldest of 11, and I believe 8 of the 11 are heavily influenced by making as many things like beadwork, sculpting, just a number of things.
You also have Kaw and Chumash ancestry. Can you talk a little bit about how those influences manifest themselves in your art?
Yes, the Kaw side, I really have little knowledge about. My mother, her grandpa, his name was Levi Shoto. He was 1 in 8 of the last full-bloods left of the tribe, and he passed away in 1980, and I believe the last full-blood passed away in 2000, and so through that he was an orphan, and whenever he married my great-grandma, he decided to move to Cheyenne country in El Reno. And so my mom, she primarily grew up with just the Cheyenne relatives. And so I can't really say I have any influence that comes in through my Kaw side. And as far as my Chumash side, that really didn't start coming around until the past few years. I've only been to the reservation one time before 2012, which was when I was 14 years old. I went to go meet my great-grandma. She was sick and she passed away after that visit, but I was glad to meet her. And so after I graduated from OU in 2011, the director of education, she invited me to do an exhibit out there. I believe the exhibit was called Portraits of a People, and she asked if I had any work that might reflect that. So yeah, I have some portraits of my grandma and my dad and a couple cousins, and they're all descendants of the tribe. So they invited me to take part in that. So I shipped out my works, and then got to re-meet a lot of relatives I haven't seen since I was a teenager. And while I was out there, I have some aunties out there who have a lot of information on the rock art that's out there. And when I saw that, it was just beautiful, and just the color combinations, the organic designs, and so they said, "Here, go ahead and take these in whatever way they might influence you. And just it'll be good for you to learn about that too." So over the past 2 years, I've been getting into a lot of drawings that I've been doing with Prismacolor pencils, and I've been kind of reinterpreting what I might see through those designs. Even though I really don't know what they mean, I just kind of pull in whatever influence I can out of them and interpret them in my own way.
That sounds interesting. So what were your experiences with art in elementary school growing up?
Most of the schools I went to when I was a younger kid, they really didn't have any art classes. So primarily it was just being around my dad. Whenever I got into high school, they had an artist named Dan Horsechief. He would do a couple of the after-school programs, and he was a great influence on me as an artist whenever I was coming of age. And he just encouraged me to do some research on other works, and so I really didn't get much art education until I got into the end of high school and then after.
And high school was at Sequoia, right?
Yes.
Were you also involved in athletics there?
Yes, I was athletics surrounded my entire life when I was over there. Just whenever I was starting to get into my art, I started to become so immersed into track and cross country that I pushed all my art aside. And so yeah, I did cross country and track, and that led me to scholarship to Oklahoma Baptist.
And at Oklahoma Baptist, you decided you were going to major in art?
Yes. For the first 2 years, I really wasn't thinking too much of a major. I knew that it was going to pull me back into the arts, but whenever I was a junior, after I got all my requirements out of the way, that was when I went full head. I went head on into our art program, and ever since I've been just fully addicted.
So what kind of base did you get at Oklahoma Baptist University? In terms of art, what kinds of skills?
Okay. When I was at Oklahoma Baptist, a lot of it was, as many art students would get, the fundamentals. Because I wasn't just now starting my practices of being an artist, a lot of times I kind of kept to myself. I was able to pick up on a lot of the fundamentals pretty quick. So I kind of skipped a lot of things and went straight into the advanced courses. And some of the most important things that I've learned from that school towards the end was how to work as a professional, the things that you need, how to network, how to be able to promote yourself, how to be in charge of the little things like your resume, your bio, and all those things. Those were some of the main things that I pulled out of that school. Other than that, they always let me just do my own thing and let my own experiences develop wherever my artwork was going to go.
Kind of a long independent study.
Yeah.
When did you sell your first painting, or first piece of beadwork, I guess, too?
Yeah. For a long time, I really didn't get into the sales and exhibits of my artwork. A lot of people were really pushing me to do so, but I don't think it was until 2010 until I started exhibiting. And out of that first exhibit that I did, that's when I got my first sale. So,
what was that like?
It was, at the time, it felt like a long time coming because I was working towards it, but I really didn't want my work to be out there until I was fully satisfied with it.
How did you get to the University of Oklahoma after college? Did you go straight from Oklahoma Baptist University into the MFA program at OU? Or?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
No time in between?
No, yeah. Yeah, I just went everything back to back, high school to bachelor's to master's, and just kept the ball rolling.
How did you find out about their program?
I just did my own research on the university. I looked around at other programs, but some of the things they had, some of the information they had throughout their collections. Take example the history collection they have of all the Native American tribes around the state. I knew that was going to be information that I needed for my work, and I knew that the painting instructor, the painting chair over there, he had a very good grasp of modern concepts, and that was something I wanted to pull into my work as well.
And who is the chair?
His name was Tommy White.
Were there some other professors there that were especially influential?
Yes, Marvin Begay. He was a great influence on my experience at the University of Oklahoma. The talks that I had with him as a graduate student, as far as the subject matter of contemporary Native American works, he was very influential in letting me know the things that might be ahead of as far as conversations with the work that I was doing, and just exploring not only Native American tribes here in Oklahoma or around the state, but looking at other indigenous cultures around the world. And so those are some of the things that Marvin brought to my work and my research habits. And so that's just one example.
How did your style change while you were at OU?
Yes, going into the program, one of the things that me and my former chair, Tommy White, came to an agreement was whatever it is that you go into the program with, it would be a waste of time if you came out of the program with that same kind of work. So being able to challenge my work on all levels was the main focus that I had at the university. So whenever I came in, I was primarily doing portraits that came from historical perspectives from my great-great-grandparents. None of them were contemporary, and designs from that I got from the Native American Church. They were very flat. They were pretty repetitive, but they're kind of static from my point of view. So I wanted to take the time to learn how to bring something new as far as shaping panels, building skills, and if I was to do any portraits, I wanted to challenge the subject matter of how is it relevant to today, and on all ends, from realism to abstraction, that's how I always challenge my work. How is it relevant to today, and what kind of influences I get from history?
Was it at OU that you started working on panels?
Yes. Yeah, up to that point I never had any workshop to work with.
What happened after you graduated?
Well, the day after graduation, I just remember laying in my apartment thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. I was kind of tapping my foot, and so I'm going to get on the internet and see if there's any exhibitions going on. And when I got on my laptop, the first thing I saw was an exhibition happening at Red Cloud Indian School up north of Pine Ridge. So I was like, well, I'm not going to lay here, that's all I know. So I packed my work up, drove all the way to South Dakota, and delivered my works, and barely got in for the submission. And so I got my first award right away after I graduated and sold that piece of that Heritage Center. Did
you stay around then for the opening, the show and the reception?
No, I wasn't able to.
Yeah.
And
wow, yeah, you won an award.
Yeah, so from there...
for Most Promising Young Artist, wasn't it? Or do you remember the...
Yeah, Outstanding Young Artist Award. And from there, people started contacting me, emailing me if I had any other works, and so I've just been selling from there, and it's just been like one big snowball effect.
That's wonderful. So you're saying a lot of commissions basically came through from that.
Yeah.
What was the piece that you had in that show?
It was, the piece was titled Ishuwana, which is, I've been told a few ways of how that translation goes, like when sun's just not breaking right in the early morning, which is a lot of, we sing that those words a lot in our morning songs in the Native American church. And the painting itself was a teepee on the horizon, and the sun was just now beginning to break. And so that was just the piece that I did, and I just wanted to see what kind of chances I would have if I brought it up there.
Do you do booth shows very much?
Never have.
I didn't think.
Yeah, whenever, I believe it was 1 year after I graduated from OU, I became the artist in residence at the Jacobson House. And the director there at the time was Cricket Rhodes. She always liked to do art market in the wintertime and in the springtime. She'd always ask me if I wanted to do any booths, but I just opened up the space, did open studio visits. So up to this point, I haven't been able to do any booth shows like Indian Market in Santa Fe or anything, but it's something I want to do.
How did the artist in residency come about?
Yeah, whenever I was still hanging around Norman after I graduated, I'll just go by and visit, and she'll just be curious of what I'll be up to. And she said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "The main thing I know unquestionably that I want to do is I want to continue to make my work without any interruptions in my everyday routines." She said, "Well, that sounds good. We have an open space if you need it, which is the building just south of the main house of the Jacobson." And she said, "Would you be interested in using that space?" I said, "Yeah, I'll use it." And she said, "Yeah, there's no restrictions. You make whatever you want, and we'll give you a key." And so I just really liked the support that they gave over there.
Yeah, so it was really support in terms of space, providing you with a free space, and you were selling some of the stuff that you did to your collectors. Or
Yeah.
What do you think has been one of your most important museum shows so far?
I haven't done very many museum shows, but I would have to say that before I graduated at OU, they had the annual student exhibition, and that was the first museum collection that my works became part of.
Was it at the Fred Jones, or was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe I got the what was that award called? Does it say on there?
Well, I don't have your CV,
Okay.
but yeah, we can
Yeah.
insert it in
Okay.
brackets. And
All right, yeah. So I got the collection award for that, and so that was my first time I had my work become a part of any kind of museum collection. So.
cool. Sometimes the hardest part of doing art is the business aspect. How do you handle that?
Yeah, it definitely makes you work twice as hard for whatever it is you want to do. Just whenever I'm starting to get into the groove of making the work, I have to get down and do the emails and do all the updates of the information they want. So I just try to make everything move together. I really don't get too many conflicts, but everything is trial and error as far as learning how to ship works, who to ship works with, making sure that whoever I'm gonna be shipping through, that the buyer is gonna get everything in a timely manner. So everything's been trial and error up to this point, and now that I've been doing it for a few years, I've been able to kind of find the smoother routes of how to take care of my business with other buyers.
Have you spent any time applying for grants too, or?
I've applied for a few, but I've never got any. Yeah.
It can be time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
You've taught art both as a graduate student at OU and at Bacone. How has teaching art to others impacted your own work?
Yes, that's whenever I was teaching courses with the University of Oklahoma and teaching courses for Bacone. One thing that I really enjoyed was whenever I was going to teach a subject, I would realize that I kind of forgot a lot of information. So it made me go in and actually relearn a lot of subjects. And whenever I was relearning a lot of the subjects through art history or contemporary works that I was researching, I realized that I missed something. And so I'd bring it back into my work to practice with, and that way I could show them it's different ends of whatever it is I was talking about.
And you were at Bacone how long?
For 1 year, 2 semesters.
How did that come about, that teaching assignment?
Well, whenever I was artist in residence with the Jacobson House, I would always like to hang out for the second walk Friday in Norman. And I believe in that springtime of 2012, they were having a exhibit at Main Site with Tony Tiger, Marvin Begay, and a lot of those who are involved with the Southeastern Artists Association. So I went to go check it out because I knew they were all going to be over there, and so I went to go visit with them. And Tony Tiger, we had a good visit, and he said, "Hey, there's only 2 of us who are instructing at Bacone, me and Troy Jackson. So he's like, if you're interested, you could come join us. Just send me your resume and your CV and everything." And so I was like, "Okay, that sounds cool. I'll do what I can." And I told him I won't be able to move over there, but I'll be able to commute. So I commuted twice a week from Oklahoma City to Muskogee, which was pretty challenging.
I thought you gave a really good talk at the show Uncommon Brothers at the Jacobson House when you showed slides of your work. How do you handle the public speaking that's involved with being an artist?
Yeah, sometimes it's smooth, sometimes not as much. I don't consider myself a very verbal person as far as the things I need to explain in my art, because that is one thing that has driven me ever since I was a little kid, to be able to express it visually. A lot of things that I can't push out vocally, I have to force it out through my visuals. And so usually if I have spent a lot of time on the visual work, it really helps me communicate it verbally. So generally whenever I'm explaining an older body of work, I can speak it a lot clearer to my audience. Whenever I have a new body of work, it's still kind of sinking in my mind, and I kind of stumble around a little bit.
That's interesting. How much have you traveled out of state with your work?
I've, as I mentioned, South Dakota was my first out of state exhibit, or taking part of any exhibit. I did that a few times. I believe I made that trip 4 times. And then I've been able to travel to San Ynez, California to do that exhibit. And then going out to Santa Fe, just meeting artists. I never exhibited out there, but I met an artist named Deani White Hawk Polk. She's, I think she's the director of the All My Relations Gallery in Minnesota, and she asked me if I wanted to take part in an exhibit up there in the summer of 2012. So I wasn't able to make that trip, but I was re-invited to another exhibit in the summertime of 2013 with and the exhibit was called art from Indian Territory. I was able to make that trip up there. Other than that, I've just been shipping works out to different places around.
What other galleries have you found representation in?
Let's see. I've never been fully represented by any gallery, but I've exhibited in Marvin Umbre Studios in the Paseo district. I've exhibited at Tribes 131 in Norman. I've exhibited in Momentum, Tulsa Momentum, artists, young artists exhibits, and Oklahoma City Momentum. And every year they're generally in different spaces. So those have been some of the main places I've exhibited.
And it's been a mix of native and non-native venues.
Yes. I always try to keep all my options open. I don't ever want to be cornered off into just contemporary mainstream galleries. And I don't ever want to be cornered off into just being in Native American avenues. So I kind of like to get a little feel of both, and I like to expose myself to everybody.
It seems like your work is sort of roughly divided between the realism and then the abstract work, and your website mentions that you like oils for your realistic paintings and acrylics for your abstracts. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
A lot of abstract work, as far as a lot of the abstract work that I've done, has been pretty hard-edged, and it comes in handy with acrylics whenever I'm using a lot of tape. I'm able to layer everything down the way I want it, and all I gotta do is pull that tape off to allow it to give it my designs that hard edge that I'm looking for. And in the design work, I could kind of work quicker with acrylics, and which if I was to do those same kind of design works with the oils, it gets a little bit too messy and the designs don't come out the way I want it. As far as portraits go, I really like to take my time. I don't want to rush the textures and the surfaces of the portraits that I do, so I just really enjoy taking my time with the oils whenever it comes to realism.
I'd like to talk about your creative process a little bit more in detail. Have you experimented with other media besides oils and acrylics?
I've experimented with lithography for about a year and a half when I was at OU. I've experimented with screen printing, a little bit of installation work, but I've never exhibited it, and a little bit of clay work. But in the end, it doesn't really keep my attention long enough for me to continue it. I don't want to ever fully reject it, because I think down the road I might find more use for it. Right. But up to this point, those have been the things that have been able to keep my attention long enough.
Was some of the screen printing in conjunction with the Southeastern Artists Association or not?
No.
Okay.
Yes, it's all been on my own.
You haven't been involved with them at all?
No.
I thought I saw some collage work of yours. Maybe not. What do you like about painting on Masonite as opposed to canvas or board?
Yeah, I haven't painted on canvas in probably about 6 years. Primarily because whenever I wanted to learn how to build it on my own, I wanted to get the full experience of knowing the piece inside and out. And whenever I learned how to build Masonite and Bristol board panels, I started experimenting a whole lot. I started experimenting on those quite a bit, as far as textures and just how you handle the piece. Whenever you got a panel, you can get as aggressive as you want almost until you break the thing. But like if I would have a palette knife, I could scratch into it the way I want, and I could get different surfaces, different layers that I couldn't with canvas, because if I treated the canvas the same way I did a Masonite panel, I'd probably rip the canvas.
Right. And you have some wood cutting equipment. Did you have any kind of woodworking background before you started working with the Masonite?
No. Prior to OU, I had zero experience with any power tools as far as table saws, miter saws, and all those. Whenever I was in my second year at OU, I signed up for the TA position that they had available. And one thing that they had me do in that position was they said, well, you need to fulfill so many hours for the week. And it's okay. They said, well, you can keep the wood shop open twice a week. And they said, do you have any experience? I said, no. They said, well, we'll show you one demo and then you're in charge. So I got that one demonstration, and from that point on, I thought I better learn all these tools before I start getting all the questions. Sure enough, all those questions came, and I just learned it all on the spot.
That was a great apprenticeship.
Yeah.
So the other advantage, of course, is that you can experiment with different sizes and shapes that aren't like custom sizes. Why is shape such an important part of the painting process?
Yeah, whenever I got into shaping some of my first panels, there were some designs that I had in mind from my grandma's beadwork. She used to explain one design the most that I could remember. It was called a mountain design. And I've tried to do narratives of some of the influence I got from that design she was talking about, but they never really came to life for me, so I kind of got tired of trying to narrate it, so I was like, well, I'm just going to shape it. And so it took me a couple months to learn how to pull that off, but whenever I learned how to do those shapes, it kind of brought in a whole different aspect of building. And from that time on, whenever I got into the building part, I started finding myself a little bit more interested in the building of an entire thing that you'll be able to look around, not just front, but side and back, all around. And it just brought in a whole different aesthetic excitement for me to build it like that.
So when you talk about narrative, you're talking about a visual narrative.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about working those 3 dimensions, you're talking about pieces that actually are painted on every side, sort of? Oh, wow, okay. Yeah. Hopefully we get to see one of those.
Yeah. Except for the back.
Except for the back. Okay, I was going to say with the option.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of making your own frames, you taught yourself that as well, I guess.
I had one demonstration, and then from
Where at?
The University of Oklahoma. I was given one demonstration of how to make a simple wooden frame, and from there I've learned a few different ways to go about it.
You know, some artists would be like, I don't want to spend my time doing that, but what's the reward?
Knowing that most people wouldn't go through the time to do that. That's been the way I feel is if a lot of artists kind of they bring concerns about other people copying their works. I've never felt that. And if someone was wanting to go through some of the loops that I go through to make those things, I say feel free, but it's going to be a while before you get there.
Right. Good luck. Have you collaborated on any artwork with other artists?
No, I haven't been able to up to this point.
Mm-hmm. I think I remember that your daughter was one of your models. Is that right?
My niece was.
Your niece. Do you use live models when you do realistic portraits?
No, I just use photographs. Yeah.
Do you do a lot of preliminary sketching?
No, I never really got into sketching too much. A lot of times, whenever I get the urge to do something, it has to come out now, so I just get right to it.
Do the fully finished drawing right away.
Every once in a while, I'll do one quick sketch, but other than that, I just go right into it and just hope for the best.
How has your subject matter changed since you got your MFA?
It's the subject matter has kind of been along the same lines, but I've been able to interpret it visually in a few different ways. I've been able to do it more abstract, and that's kind of been the trail I've been on for the past few years, is learning how to interpret it differently through symbols that I might be able to bring it to a different angle. Haven't really done very many portraits at all since I graduated from OU, but yeah, the subject matter has been the same, but interpreting it visually has been kind of my main focus lately.
What's your favorite subject to explore when you're painting?
I'd have to say, let's see. Bloodline. I've always, ever since I was a little kid, I've always been interested in my bloodline. Of course, today, many people of my generation, especially here in Oklahoma, are pretty mixed as far as our cultures go. My mom's side is primarily Cheyenne, and then my dad's side is Chumash, but he's also part Spanish. And just researching more about who I come from is always something that's been able to keep my interest, because whenever I learn more about who I came from, it gives me more motivation to share with my future generation, my daughters, my nieces and nephews. So that's been my favorite thing to work with.
What kinds of research do you do?
I like to check out other artists. Of course, there's the artists that are in art history, but I like to check out what's going on now. I get on as many. I like to check out the contemporary galleries that are happening in Tulsa and Oklahoma City.
You like to go to shows?
Yes, and then I like to check out what's happening around the country, and a lot of it is I've been able to find a whole lot of Facebook artists that like to put their pages up. I like to read their artist statements, read their bios, and see what kind of work they're doing and what works as far as how they pull those three things together. And so those are some of the ways that I bring to my work, so I can kind of bring those things together better for myself. And of course, researching their tribal backgrounds and how they interpret it as well.
But you don't have your own website yet?
Not at this point. Yeah, I need to.
How about your palette or palette, how has that changed?
My my palette is as an undergraduate, it was always it was pretty much always just one or two colors, three colors, four at the most, and they were never they never had that sophistication of learning how to complement it, how to contrast it. And, when I went through graduate school, that began to develop more towards the very end. But over these past few years, I've been able to focus on how those things work even better. So my palette itself is I try not to limit it to just not only the simple things, but I try to pull in how those things work together all around.
How important is humor in your work?
Lately it's been kind of serious. I want to bring some humor back into it, and because the serious part could kind of feel like a drag, not only to the viewer but yourself sometimes. So in time, I do want to bring in the humor. Up to this point, it's not very important.
Do you title your pieces?
Yes.
And how do you get your ideas for your titles? Does the image come first and then the title, or?
Yes, that's a lot of my titles have been the secondary thing. As I mentioned earlier, whenever I have an urge to get a visual out, it comes so fast that my thoughts come second, and so it's kind of been a challenge too, because if I'm invited to do a show and there's a deadline, I pull the work out, I have all the work ready, but they say, well, what's your title? I was like, hold on. So yeah, it usually comes second, and usually, as I mentioned, it takes time for me to sit with it for a little bit before it all makes sense, and then the title comes.
How about your signature? Has that been difficult to decide how to sign pieces?
No, whenever I was an undergraduate, when I was doing my senior exhibition, I was talking to my grandma about it, and I said, did you ever sign your work? She says, yeah. Everyone always knew me as Mouse Trail. She said, so I used to put a P and then like make a little mouse design. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. And she said, and your grandpas, they all do the same with their work. Go check it out. So I went to go check out my grandpa's, how they did their signatures. And so my Cheyenne name is Nakohiamio, which means bear track. And so I decided to go with that. I do an M that's real big, and then the M turns into like a bear track itself as I put the E down. So
we get to see that in a minute. So what is your creative process, beginning with how you get your ideas? Like sometimes people will write things in a notebook, or they'll just start working and something will develop. Sort of, what's your typical process?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I really don't get too much into sketching. Sometimes it comes out through that, but for the most part, I like to keep some of my works around, because whenever I get multiple works around, like if I have a portrait next to me and I have another one of my abstract pieces next to me, both of those things will kind of click together, and they'll kind of bring about a middle ground of what I might have missed in both of those pieces, and they kind of feed off of each other.
So the new piece will be reflecting that middle ground.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You have a lot more years to go in your career, just starting out here, but But looking back from this moment, what's been one important fork in the road for you when you could have gone one way and you decided to go this other way?
Whenever I was about to be done with school, one of my professors, who's he's pretty active in his art making and exhibits. He told me, he said, if this is what you want to do, just do it, and do everything you can to not let anything sidetrack you from that. And if you have to struggle for a little bit, that's what you're gonna have to work with, but just know that it'll start clicking off for you, and more opportunities will come from it. So whenever times get pretty hard, I always think about that, and sure enough, things always open up.
What's been the biggest highlight of your career so far?
At this point, I feel like everything's been still been more on the emerging side of everything. I haven't had the big awards or big fellowships yet, but every award that I've gotten so far, like I've had the Outstanding Artist Award, Young Artist Award in South Dakota, and Juror's Choice Award
at the Cherokee National Park.
Yeah, and the Fred Jones Art Collection. Those things kind of, I see them all as equal with one another, because they give me motivation to push for what's bigger in the future.
What's been a low point so far?
Let's see. After I got done, whenever I decided to stay here in Oklahoma City, after I finished up the school year with Bacone, I had to reflect of what I was going to do again, and because this time I didn't have a teaching position available, I didn't have a residency lined up, and that really made me question, what am I doing this for? Because at this point, all the advice that I had in school was before I became a father. And whenever it looped back around and not having anything open, I have my daughter. And I have to really think about, am I just doing this for me, or how am I going to do this in a way that's going to benefit my daughter? That was kind of a low point, but keeping back to that advice, it still has motivated me to keep on this path until things work out.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add, or anything we didn't cover before we look at your work?
I believe that's good until we go ahead and go through the work.
Okay, well, pause this a minute here. Okay, so you want to tell us about this fan and the little turtle?
Yes, about 2 years ago, which was 2012, I had an uncle who likes to go to Native American church meetings, and I was just getting out of that meeting that morning, and he heard that my daughter was just born, and he said, "Hey, I heard your daughter was born just a few weeks ago." I said, "Yeah." So, "Hey, I got something for you." And he said, "Do you know how to make fan handles, or you know how to bead or anything?" I said, "No." And he pulled out this red tail and said, "Here, learn." It's just for your daughter.
And you had never beaded a fan handle before?
No, didn't have any experience of beading at all. And so I thought that was a great gesture, and so it motivated me quite a bit to figure it out. It took me a year and a half to figure everything out, but yeah, this is my daughter's first fan, and it was the first fan I ever made. And I wanted her to have something for whenever she gets older, if she wants to dance, she wants to go to meetings. So it motivated me quite a bit to finish it the way it is. And with our kids, with our Cheyenne kids, my grandma always told me it's very important to make sure you get the last part of the umbilical cord that comes off the baby, which is called the histap. And she said whenever you get that, make sure that you keep it in a safe place. And she said we usually put the boys in the lizard design, and then we usually put the girls into a turtle design. So whenever that came off, I decided, well, if I'm going to learn how to make a fan for her, I want to be able to learn how to make her turtle for her too. And I want those things to go together for when she gets older. So that's been the motivation in this story of how these things came about.
Okay, Michael, you want to tell us about this painting?
Yeah, this piece is titled "The Widow's Lair," and the widow's lair is representational of the word "vihol" in Cheyenne, which is interpreted for spider, but it was a word that we gave to the white Europeans as they came into this country. It's a reoccurring theme that goes in my work. When I was younger, I did paintings to represent the vihol in literal interpretations, as in for portraits or whatever. But as I've been getting older, I've been doing it more symbolically. And the story itself stems off of some things that my grandma used to tell me about the society that we live in, that the Western European society that is developed into the society that we live in today can be very unforgiving to Native people in a lot of ways. And one thing how she used to explain it was, if you were to get caught in a lifestyle of alcoholism, or if you get caught into a life of unhealthy eating, such as diabetes, she has always explained that to me as being caught into the spider's web. And she always tells me, she said, don't allow yourself to get caught in that spider's web. Take care of yourself, and be aware of the things that don't come from us, that can harm us as a people. So for this piece, I used the symbol of a black widow, the red diamonds that are on a black widow's back. I tried to make the design as simple as I could, but to kind of bring it together in a way that brings you towards the middle visually, because that's how easy it is to be caught into the spider's web.
And there's actually diamonds within diamonds. So how about this painting? What can you tell us about this?
Okay, this is also a reoccurring image that's in my work. I've interpreted it abstractly, but this is a literal interpretation of it. It's for Cheyennes, it's known as OOHRP, Sacred Mountain in South Dakota, which is located north of Rapid City, and it's known as Bear Butte. And this place has been a lot of influence on me culturally, and art practices, because whenever I was younger, my grandma would always talk about the design through beadwork, and it always amazed me how many stories have came from this location, not only about our history but about where we're going. And the first time I seen this mountain was whenever I was a teenager, and we came across it in the nighttime, and I just thought it was a very powerful memory that I couldn't see in the daytime, but just seeing the silhouette and how huge it was, it's a memory that it always sticks in my mind. And whenever I do my contemporary works, as far as the subject matter that focuses only on today, I always have to reflect back on the stories that come from this mountain, to kind of see whereabout we've been as a people, and also reflecting about these stories that come from our prophet, Sweet Medicine, about where we're going. So those things always help me come to a more or less balanced approach of how I interpret where we're at today.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Michael. Appreciate your time today.
Yes.